So there is if you've been watching the channel recently and watching the studies, you'll know that I've gone through a series of apologetic things that we've been looking at, dealing with Charlie Kirk and dominionism as a theology, and really as a view of the end times, and why that really influences things like the New Apostolic Reformation, like the Seven Mountains Mandate, which leads to one of the Seven Mountains, Christian nationalism, government, work that's going on. And it was interesting, it is interesting in the conversations that are going on the YouTube channel, the comments that are happening. There are a couple of other things that came up, and so we've been doing some shorts on those as well. This one I want to address what are known as the Noahide Laws. And so there are people who are very, very troubled by this. And what are they, and where do they come from? And really, why is it that we should, some people would say we need to be very, very concerned about this, and others, I would put myself into this camp. I don't disagree that there are people who really genuinely want to see this, but logistically, I don't fear that this will take place, and I'll explain why that is. So I'm going to have a couple of slides here, and I'm actually going to have a picture I think you'll find pretty interesting, taken from our last trip to Israel. But let me just give a little bit of a background on this. Just it'll help to make a little bit of sense. I want to go through what these laws are, and we'll put up where they come from, and really who was one of the modern champions of it. But then to look exactly at what they are and what people are proposing to do with them, and why it has some people very, very troubled, and why I am not troubled as they are about them. So we'll get into that here in just a moment. In fact, let me go ahead and bring this up, because I want to go to one of the most prolific sources for it, probably the people who have really in the modern times made this much more of a something that they're paying attention to. It was done through a man named Menachem Schneerson, a rabbi, and I'll bring up his picture. Let me do that first. I'll bring up a picture of him, and I'll tell you what was going on at the time. Now, this man is named Menachem Schneerson, and he's, I'll be pulling up from their website, Chabad. It was a sect within Orthodox Judaism. He was here in the States, and he was seen by some people as the Messiah. They really believed that he was that messianic figure, and he talked about these laws and felt that they should be kind of universally observed throughout the world. And if they could do that, if that could be done, that everybody would be obedient to these laws, then there could be peace in the world. And so they saw that as like, well, wow, if he could pull this off and bring peace to the world, he'd be a Messiah. So you can see how this would kind of work. Now, you can go find these actual laws mentioned through the Talmud, but these 7 laws that are going to be talked about here in just a moment, you can find them, you kind of extrapolate a number of them. Some are directly from the 10 Commandments, other ones are just more from the law that was given through Moses. But this man, Schneerson, and this picture came when we were there in Israel back in 2023. And back in 2023, we were in Israel at the time when all the quote-unquote riots were taking place, and they were talking about shutting down the airport, and there were marches in the streets, they were lighting stuff on fire in Tel Aviv, and it just made it sound like it was riots. Unfortunately, some people who pay attention to Israeli politics and all that stuff and live there and are always giving updates about things that are happening, were talking about it being on the brink of civil war and all this stuff. This picture I took in Tel Aviv as we're driving on the freeway, leaving from Jerusalem, going up the coast. We came through Tel Aviv on our way going north, and we drove right past there on the freeway, and here's his picture. Interesting, because Tel Aviv is very, very secular, but there was nothing going on in the city. There's nothing burning, there's no smoke going on, everybody's back to work, everything's back the way that it's supposed to be. It was just another day. So what they made it sound like is that we're on the brink of civil war and they're shutting down the airport. Well, they shut down the airport because it was a planned strike and it was only supposed to be for half a day. The main part of our group was leaving, had already left that day that they supposedly, had this big shutdown of the airport. They made it sound like torches and pitchforks, but it wasn't. But it was just made a bunch of noise. That same night, the day before I took this picture, we were out on the streets in Jerusalem, and one of this mob of hundreds, if not thousands of people was coming right towards us, and they looked like anything that you would have seen from a Portland riot that was going on during the summers, a few summers back, of the Antifa stuff. That's what it looked like. But we were there for all of this stuff. And when we're hearing all of this insanity that people were asking us if we were safe or anything else, I was actually taking a video of this as we're driving on the freeway and saying, hey, look at the Civil War. It was just another day. And as I panned over, I looked at this, and here he is on a billboard. And when you see the Hebrew writing there, it's to the effect of something like he's among us, or he walks among us, or he lives among us, something like that. But some people would say, well, that we're talking about the Messiah. Some would say it's actually Schneerson. There are some who actually hold vigil and still are waiting for him to resurrect, thinking he would be this man of peace, he would be this Messiah, and he would govern the world through these Noahide laws. And so Chabad is his sect. It's actually gotten bigger ever since he has left the scene. And let me bring up what that is, and I'll take down his picture and put up his organization and what they say about those laws. Okay, so here is from their website. We'll have to do this in a couple of slides just because I might be able to fit it in one, we'll see. But these Noahide laws are put here, it asks what are they, and so it says the 7 Noahide laws are rules that all of us must keep, regardless of who we are or from where we come. Without these 7 things, it would be impossible for humanity to live together in harmony. Now, as Christians, we know that the world will never live in harmony if we really take the scriptures serious. That's just not in man's future. But these people would not look at the world like the Christian looks at it. These are people who are very much Orthodox Jewish, and a particular sect who believes that really their most prominent member, Rabbi Schneerson, who's been gone for, again, more than 30 years, was really going to usher this in. So what are these 7 laws? Now, here they are. Do not profane God's oneness in any way. And there are people who read that and they go, well, look, right there, that would be a problem, because Christians would say there's a oneness of God, but they would disagree with Chabad's version of this, because they would say that there isn't a Trinity. There's not Father, Son, and Spirit. It's just one God. They won't even use his full name. We would say, no, Jesus is God, as is the Holy Spirit, the Trinitarian view. So the fear is, when you read the most orthodox of the orthodox, or the people that are the most stringent of this, is that anybody who violates these would be put to death. So it goes that people would say, well, when these things take place, the Christians would be put to death. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. The second one is that you will not curse your Creator, no matter how angry you may be. Do not take it out verbally against your Creator. Now, do not murder, of course, one of the 7 commandments. Do not eat the limb of something that's still living, as far as an animal is concerned, which is, again, we know that they're not supposed to drink blood or eat something that's been strangled. That was against the original law. This one is a little bit more. You're not eating something while it's still alive. Of course, you would be violating the idea of the consumption of blood at that point anyway, so the two are kind of related. So again, you won't steal, which is, again, something that's taken from the 10 Commandments. Whatever benefits you receive in this world, make sure that none of them are at the unfair expense of someone else. And then it says harness and channel the human libido. That's just a very fancy way of saying abstain from immorality, sexual immorality. And then the last one is establish courts of law and ensure that justice is done in our world. Now, among the children of Israel, these were all in operation in some form. So it's not like they're really out on a limb kind of a situation. So you can read the rest of these, and you can read what people have as far as their concerns. You can find other organizations that might have them in a different order, but Chabad was really kind of carrying the mantle for this during Schneerson's time, and really since then. But this is really ancient kind of stuff. But again, it has a weird eschatology to it, because they believe that someone will be able to implement these things worldwide, and that will ultimately bring peace, and anybody who abides by them will go to heaven when they die. That's a whole different view of the end of things that any of us have as Christians. We don't believe in those things. So let me bring this down, and let's complete this part of it, because I think it's important that we kind of look at this and say, is there real cause for concern? Are there people walking this planet who very, very much want to see these things taking place, and they are dedicated to the cause? Do they exist among us? There's no question. I'm sure that they do. would they actually go to the point where if you found someone who was violating these things, that they should suffer the death penalty? According to the law, some of these things were punishable by death. The idea of murdering, yeah, according to the law, but that's among the children of Israel. So who was governed by the laws of Moses? Anyone who was living among the children of Israel and the children of Israel. But it wasn't, God didn't have them going out proactively anywhere in the world and killing anybody that was not walking according to the law. That was never the intent. So are there people who would want to be able to do something like this in the world? Sure, they're praying for it. There's no question at all. But do I lose sleep at night, like I say, thinking that this might happen somehow? And I know that there were a number of people who were pointing to, at the very beginning of the Trump administration, the beginning of this year, that there was a religious council or something, some office of religious this, that, or the other thing. Anyway, for all the problems that we have with Paula White, who's just crazy in the extreme, she's been having his ear for a very, very long time. But she's about the last person on the planet that would want to implement something like this, because she would be probably one of the first ones to have her head removed. So when I hear that this was one of the concerns, that they were going to try to backdoor this through the Trump administration, it's like, logistically, I don't think that you for a moment really understand what it would take to try to put this in. First of all, you would have to find people who were actually willing to live by these examples of what is acceptable and not acceptable conduct. Second of all, you would have to be able to overcome and absolutely overthrow everything about this form of government. You would have to control the military. You would have to control everything to force this compliance. So this would be, again, according to Jewish law, you would have the entire country would have to change from a secular democracy, representative form of democracy, to a theocracy governed by 7 laws found in the Old Testament, really from a very traditional Jewish, actually, sect of Judaism, modern day, kind of more from the Talmud. So I ask you the question, in a country with 330 or so million people of about every kind of different belief that there actually could be, do you really think that you could get enough people who wanted to implement these kind of laws that they could make all 333 million of us, or how many we have, subject to these laws anytime in the near future? Again, logistically, the whole thing is just kind of absurd on its face. So it gets people stirred up and worried about it, but like, I don't know how you think that that's supposed to take place when most of the country is very much secular and would never want to live according to these things, let alone be penalized for not doing them. So who is it that has the kind of control that they would be able to overthrow the entire type of government that we have in order to implement something like this? And how would you not have a war over that? So again, are there people who are really, really serious about this? Absolutely. Are they in numbers that we have to even think that they could start to chip away at trying to implement these things when the country is getting further and further away from godliness and doing anything that would even resemble some of these? And most of those we're not going to disagree with. I don't know very many Christians that are okay with trying to murder or steal or be immoral or eat something that's still alive. You know, these are things that we wouldn't say in and of themselves we're going to object. Would we object a government trying to impose these on the people? Again, you would have to completely overthrow the entirety of the Constitution. So what you would need is a military coup, would have to take over the entire country and implement something like this, because it would get shot down in the courts if they were still in operation. This would never see the light of day. So I don't lose, again, any sleep thinking that these are some kind of a very worrisome kind of a future. And that's for the United States, which still has a bit more, as corrupt as we are, when you compare us on these kinds of matters compared to much of the rest of the world. The idea that you're going to get the whole world to get behind this is just comical to me, that there are people who are concerned that this might happen and start here and make its way around the world. Again, it's comical. Now, it's interesting to read the writings of the people who really want to see this take place, but there are all kinds of fringe people who want to do all kinds of odd things. But the idea, because again, we know what's in the text, something like this is nowhere to be seen in the Bible as predictive of something that's coming in the future. Now, is there going to be at some place or at some time in the future, does the Bible talk about anything where there's going to be a dictatorial rule of someone or some group of people? Yes, there is. It's found in the tribulation, and it's not going to be according to these laws from anything that we get from there. But there's nothing that indicates to us that we have to be concerned about this kind of a law taking over the world, let alone this country. Again, this country's not built for something like this. So if somebody has a plausible way that they think that this could happen in our current situation, in our current government, in the comprising of what our citizenry is, the idea that somebody would sit idly by for this and accept it is something that I don't understand how people are very concerned about this. Because again, there may be some group of people that want to do this, but the idea that you could implement it nationwide, I cannot make a credible argument for how that's possible. So I just wanted to address what those Noahide laws are. And again, there's a lot of stuff out there on them. There's a lot of stuff out there in the Christian apologetics world that are very much concerned about this. I'm just not among them for the reasons that I've spelled out. And if you have any questions on that, I will be happy to talk about them with you. I'm sure that the video, when we make this into a short, will have lots of comments on it, and I'll have plenty to say there too. But once again, it's one thing to have an idea, something that you would want to do. Okay, great. How do you plan to implement it? And if it's something that would have to govern the entirety of this country as a theocracy, how do you expect that to work and get people to be compliant with us after you overthrow our form of government to even begin to implement it? It's like, I just don't see it in a logistical sense. I don't see a desire for it. I see most of the country getting further and further away from anything that would be even remotely close to biblical principle. So just thought we'd cover this as a topic. It's a very important one that for some people, seriously, not for me. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about this, but for some people, they're very concerned about it. And I hope this will kind of put their mind at ease a bit. So any questions, you can contact me through the ministry's website, which is oldpaththeology.net. And I'd love to hear from you, and any questions that you might have for any of the things that we have on the channel. I certainly encourage you to contact us and love to work through them with you.